The stars burned cold in the empty void as another fleet exploded into bright, silent fire. War was all the galaxy had ever known. 5 great powers ruled the stars with iron fists. The Vex, beings of living crystal, built weapons that could crack planets. The Brood, with their hive minds, sent millions to die without a second thought. The Luminary, made of pure energy, fought wars beyond physical understanding. The reptilian Drax crushed all who stood before their massive armies, and the silicon-based Rith calculated every battle to mathematical perfection. For countless years they fought. Peace treaties lasted only until armies grew strong again. Smaller alien races were tools, nothing more. Slaves or soldiers in wars they didn't start. 300 years ago, scouts found Earth. Humans were new to space travel. They were simple compared to the ancient powers. But the 5 races saw something useful in them. Humans could adapt quickly and fought with unusual passion. "Get the new human troops to the front," ordered High Commander Vexter, his crystalline form glinting in the command ship's light. "They die easily, but they fight well before they do." And so humanity joined the endless war, given the worst missions and the oldest ships. They died by the millions on strange worlds for alien masters. Among them was Marcus Gray. Gray stood at the viewport of the Coalition battle cruiser Dauntless *, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. At 42, his face showed the scars of too many battles. One ran from his left eye to his jaw, a gift from a Brood warrior on his first deployment. His black hair was cut military short, streaked with gray that hadn't been there a year ago. "General Gray," said his aide, Lieutenant Reed. "The War Council is waiting." Gray nodded, his mind still on the battle to come. 6 years ago, his home colony on Acheron Prime had been destroyed by Vex forces in a counterattack. 2 million humans dead in an afternoon. He had lost his wife and daughter that day, and something in him had changed. He began to see patterns in the war that others missed. The council chamber was filled with commanders from all 5 major species. The air was thick with tension. "The combined fleet suffered heavy losses at Proxima Centauri," announced Admiral Krell, a massive Drax whose scales rattled with anger. 300 ships destroyed. The enemy advances toward Antares. "We should abandon the Antares system," said the Rith commander, Tech 9, his silicon body pulsing with calculations. "The probability of successful defense is 12.4%. Retreat is weakness," shouted Krell, slamming his clawed fist on the table. Gray watched them argue, seeing again the pattern that had repeated for thousands of years. The Vex wanted a technological solution. The Brood offered to sacrifice millions of drones. The Luminary suggested abandoning physical space altogether. The Drax demanded a direct attack. The Rith calculated failure. No one suggested anything new. "General Gray," said High Commander Vexter suddenly, "you've been silent. What do humans think of this situation?" The room fell quiet. Humans were rarely asked their opinion in war councils. "I think," Gray said carefully, "that we keep fighting the same war and expecting different results." The council erupted in angry shouts. 3 days later, the combined fleet suffered its worst defeat in a century at the Battle of Antares. 60% of coalition forces destroyed. Strategic command in chaos. The enemy advancing toward the core worlds. Gray was summoned to Central Command, expecting to be blamed for the defeat like so many humans before him. Instead, he found the 5 Supreme Counselors waiting. "Congratulations, General Gray," said the Luminary Counselor, her energy form flickering with what might have been amusement. "You are now Supreme Commander of all coalition forces." Gray's face remained expressionless, but his mind raced. No human had ever held such rank. "The enemy will reach coalition core worlds in 30 days, said the Rith Counselor coldly. "The war is likely lost. Good luck, Commander." As they left, Gray understood. He wasn't being promoted. He was being set up to take the blame for the final defeat. But Marcus Gray had other plans. The command center of the Dauntless Asterisk buzzed with activity as screens displayed the enemy's advance across Coalition space. General Gray had been Supreme Commander for 6 days. He had spent most of that time locked in his quarters. "He's given up," whispered officers in the halls. "The human is hiding." But Marcus Gray was not hiding. He was studying. In his quarters, Gray sat surrounded by holographic displays showing thousands of years of war records. Battle after battle, strategy after strategy, victory and defeat stretching back before humans had invented the wheel. "Computer, show me all major Vex offensives in the last century," he said, his eyes red from lack of sleep. The display changed, highlighting hundreds of battle movements in glowing blue. Now overlay Drax counterattacks. Red lines appeared, intersecting with the blue. Now Brood, Luminary, and Rith responses. More colors appeared, creating a complex web of movements that looked chaotic at first glance. But Gray saw something, a pattern. "They're all trapped," he whispered. The door chimed. "Enter," he called. Commander Tella floated in, her energy form glowing softly in the dim room. As a luminary, she had no true physical body, just controlled energy shaped roughly like a humanoid. "Supreme Commander, the staff is awaiting orders," she said. "The enemy fleet will reach Proxion IV in 3 days." Gray looked at her thoughtfully. Tella was unusual for a luminary. Most of her kind cared little for physical space, seeing war as an abstract game. But Tella understood the cost in lives. "Commander, what do you see here?" He gestured to the tangled battle lines. Tella studied the display. "Chaos," she answered. "The eternal war." "No," said Gray. "I see a dance. Every species moves exactly as their nature demands. The Vex always seek technological advantage. The Brood sacrifice countless drones without hesitation. The Luminary ignore physical targets for abstract victory conditions. The Drax rely on overwhelming force. The Rith need perfect information." He stood up and paced the room. "And our enemies do the same. We're all locked in patterns we can't see because they're built into what we are." Tella's glow pulsed with interest. "And humans? We adapt," said Gray simply. "It's what saved us on Earth. Not strength or speed or special powers, just the ability to change when we need to." He turned to her. "I need officers who don't think like their species. Find me the misfits, the Vex who values flexibility over technology, the Brood who cares about individual lives, the Luminary who understands physical space, the Drax who prefers subtlety, the Rith who trusts intuition." "Such individuals are rare," said Tella. "They are often passed over for promotion." "Exactly," said Gray with a smile. "Like a human being made Supreme Commander." 3 days later, Gray called a meeting of the Coalition Council. The chamber was filled with representatives from all species, their faces showing various forms of doubt and hostility. "Supreme Commander," said the Vex Counselor coldly, "where are your battle plans? The enemy approaches Proxion IV." Gray stepped forward. "I study our history of war," he said. "For millennia, we've fought the same way, using the same strategies, following the same patterns, and achieving the same results, endless war." He activated a display showing a new formation unlike anything the Coalition had used before. "This is how we will fight now. Mixed units, integrated command, tactics that use each species' strengths while avoiding their predictable weaknesses." The room erupted in angry shouts. "Impossible. Against all military doctrine. The human has lost his mind." The Rith Counselor, usually silent, raised a hand. The room quieted. "Fascinating," said the silicon-based being, eyes glowing with calculation. "Your plan has a 46.2% probability of success." "That's worse than a coin flip," shouted Admiral Krell. "Yet it is higher than any strategy used in the last 3 centuries, replied the Rith calmly. "I support this attempt." Gray nodded his thanks, then turned to the full council. You made me Supreme Commander expecting me to fail, to be your scapegoat. But I intend to win, not just this battle, but the war itself. He looked at each counselor in turn. And I intend to end it. Retreat. Again. Admiral Krell's scales darkened with rage as he towered over the strategy table. This is the third system we've abandoned this week. General Gray remained calm as the massive Drax commander's tail lashed back and forth, cracking against the floor. We're not abandoning them, Admiral. We're drawing the enemy in. The command room of the Dauntless Asterisk was tense. Around the table stood Gray's unusual staff. Commander Tella, the luminary who understood physical space. Lieutenant Orcs, a Vex engineer who valued adaptation over technology. Drone Captain Sev, a brood who mourned each loss. Major Tech 12, a Rith who trusted instinct along with data, and Captain Voss, a rare Drax who preferred stealth to brute force. Outside the viewports, Coalition ships pulled back from the hypersystem, leaving behind valuable colonies. The enemy will see this as weakness, growled Krell. They will see what they expect to see, replied Gray. That's the point. For 3 weeks, Gray had been reorganizing the Coalition forces. He mixed species in ways never tried before. Brood drone troops deployed from Vex carriers. Drax heavy infantry supported by luminary energy casters. Rith intelligence units guiding human special forces. Training was intense, focusing on strengths while avoiding each species' blind spots. Resistance was everywhere. Many officers refused to serve under a human. Some units would not work alongside other species. And as Gray ordered strategic withdrawals from system after system, morale plummeted. Supreme Commander, said Lieutenant Reed, entering the command room. Urgent message from Earth. Gray nodded and activated the communication screen. The face of General Harris, Earth's military representative, appeared. Gray, what the hell are you doing? Harris's face was red with anger. You've given up 3 human colony systems without a fight. We're executing a strategic plan. The enemy is 20 light years from Earth. Our people are dying. And you're running away. The Council wants you replaced. Gray leaned forward. General Harris, I need 3 more weeks. Then you'll understand. You don't have 3 weeks. The Proxian shipyards are our last major defensive position. If they fall. Trust me, said Gray quietly. Harris's expression hardened. I'll buy you 1 week, Gray. That's all. The communication ended. Will it be enough time? Asked Tella, her energy form pulsing with concern. Gray turned to the strategic display. The enemy alliance had advanced rapidly, capturing system after system that the Coalition forces seemed to abandon. Their fleets were spread thin, rushing forward to claim easy victories. It will have to be, he replied. 5 days later, word came that the massive enemy fleet was approaching the Proxian shipyards, the largest Coalition military installation, and the producer of half their warships. Defense of the shipyards was critical. Gray ordered all nearby Coalition forces to withdraw. The command deck erupted in chaos. This is treason, shouted a Vex captain, his crystal form flashing with color. You doom us all, human, cried others. Admiral Krell stepped forward, drawing his ceremonial blade. I will not follow these orders. I am taking command. The room fell silent as every officer watched the confrontation. Gray stood his ground, unarmed before the massive Drax. You have that right, Admiral, he said calmly. But before you do, look at this. He activated a new display showing the enemy fleet positions throughout Coalition space. They're overextended. Their supply lines are stretched. Their forces are divided. And now, he pointed to a flashing indicator near the Proxian shipyards. Their command council is gathering to celebrate their victory. Krell stared at the display, his reptilian eyes narrowing. All the enemy leaders, in one place. Yes, said Gray. Exactly where I want them. Krell slowly lowered his blade. You planned this. Every retreat, every abandoned system, all to create this one opportunity. Gray looked around the room at the doubtful faces of his officers. Now I need to know who will stand with me for Operation Breaking Dawn. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Commander Tella floated forward. I will. One by one, others stepped forward. First Gray's unusual staff, then other officers, until finally Admiral Krell sheathed his blade and nodded. The Drax Battle Group will follow your orders, human, but this had better work. Gray smiled for the first time in weeks. It will, Admiral. Tomorrow, we change the galaxy. The small shuttle moved silently through the darkness of space, its navigation lights dimmed. Inside, General Gray sat alone at the controls, taking a great risk. No one knew he had left the Dauntless Asterisk. Not his staff, not Commander Tella, not even Lieutenant Reed. If anyone discovered his mission, he would likely be charged with treason. Ahead, a small moon orbited a gas giant at the edge of Coalition space. According to official maps, this moon was uninhabited, but Gray knew better. A soft light scanned his shuttle. Then a voice spoke through the communication system. Approach on guided path, human visitor. Gray followed the instructions, landing inside a hidden hangar carved into the moon's rocky surface. As the shuttle door opened, he took a deep breath and stepped out. Waiting for him was a being unlike any of the major species. Tall and slender with pale skin that seemed to shimmer like mother of pearl, the alien had 4 arms and large eyes that contained galaxies of stars. General Marcus Gray, said the being. I am Elder Voss of the Solitary. We have been expecting you. Gray tried to hide his surprise. You know who I am. We know all who seek to break the cycle, replied Voss. Few have ever come this far. The Solitary were mysterious. The 5 major species considered them weak and primitive, with no military power or technological achievements worth noting. They kept to themselves on a handful of worlds, seemingly content to be ignored by the great powers. Voss led Gray through curved hallways, filled with strange artifacts and glowing crystals that hummed with energy. Your Operation Breaking Dawn begins tomorrow, said Voss. But it will fail without our help. Gray stopped walking. How do you know about Breaking Dawn? That's highly classified. Voss's star-filled eyes blinked slowly. We have watched the wars for over 10,000 years, General. We see all the patterns. They entered a large chamber where a holographic display showed the entire galaxy rotating slowly. Points of light showed battles, millions of them, stretching back through time. The wars were never natural, said Voss, gesturing to the display. They were engineered by the architects, a race that ruled the galaxy long ago. They feared that unity among the younger races would threaten their power. Gray watched as the hologram showed ancient alien ships seeding worlds with technologies and cultural programming. The architects created triggers in each species, continued Voss. The Vex received technology that would always advance toward weapons. The Brood were given hive structures that prioritized numbers over individuals. The Luminary were trapped in energy forms that disconnect them from physical reality. The Drax had their aggressive instincts enhanced. The Rith were given logic systems that lack empathy. And humans? Asked Gray. You were not part of their plan. Earth was overlooked. That is why you alone can see the patterns clearly. Gray struggled to process this revelation. If what you're saying is true, then all these wars, billions of lives lost, were for nothing. Yes, said Voss simply, and it will continue forever unless someone breaks the cycle. Gray studied the alien carefully. Why tell me this now? Why help at all? The Solitary were once like you, overlooked by the architects. We discovered the truth too late to save ourselves from near extinction. Now we preserve knowledge and wait for those who might create something better. Voss moved to another display, showing the current positions of all fleets in the sector. We can help your operation succeed, but military victory alone will not bring peace. You must show all species the truth of their manipulation. Gray considered the enormity of what he was hearing. This wasn't just about winning a battle anymore. It was about rewriting the history of the galaxy. "I came seeking tactical support," he said finally. "But you're offering something far greater." Voss nodded. "The question is whether you, and your coalition, are ready to accept it." Gray looked at the galaxy map, at all the battles that had raged across thousands of years. "We have no choice," he said. "Show me what I need to do." As Gray returned to his shuttle hours later, his mind raced with new knowledge and radical plans. Operation Breaking Dawn would now be more than a military strike. It would be the first step toward unraveling 10,000 years of manipulation. The fate of the galaxy now rested on whether he could convince beings programmed for war to choose peace instead. "All ships report ready, Supreme Commander." Lieutenant Reed's voice was steady, but Gray could see the tension in the young officer's shoulders. Around the command deck of the Dauntless Asterisk, officers from all 5 species watched their stations with unusual focus. The silence was heavy with anticipation. Gray checked the time. 6 hours since his return from meeting Elder Voss. 4 hours since he had briefed his unusual staff on parts of what he had learned. 1 hour until Operation Breaking Dawn began. "Commander Tella," he said, turning to the luminary. "Are the fleet positions confirmed?" "Yes, Supreme Commander." Tella's energy form pulsed with determination. "All ships are in position, though many captains still don't understand their unusual assignments." Gray nodded and activated the main tactical display. Across Coalition space, ships had been quietly moving into new positions for the past 24 hours. Not in the traditional battle formations favored by any one species, but in a complex web that looked almost random to untrained eyes. Around the Proxian shipyards, now controlled by the enemy, Coalition forces appeared scattered and disorganized, exactly as Gray wanted them to seem. "It's time," he said. "Send the signal." Across thousands of light years, Coalition ships received the simple command: execute Breaking Dawn. What followed shocked both allies and enemies alike. Vex cyber warfare units, hidden in what appeared to be damaged ships, unleashed viruses that paralyzed enemy communications, not through brute force as Vex normally fought, but with elegant precision that targeted specific weaknesses. Brood swarms performed high-casualty missions that would be unthinkable for other species, but instead of mindless attacks, they moved with surprising coordination, creating openings for the next phase. Luminary energy manipulators, who usually ignored physical space, focused their powers to disrupt enemy shields in ways previously thought impossible, making their ships vulnerable. Drax heavy units struck with surgical precision, rather than overwhelming force, targeting command nodes and weapon systems instead of trying to destroy entire ships. Rith intelligence teams predicted and countered enemy movements seconds before they happened, guiding Coalition forces through gaps in the enemy defenses. And humans, with their unique adaptability, coordinated it all, bridging the gaps between alien tactical doctrines. The enemy alliance, facing a completely unfamiliar style of warfare, fell into confusion. On the Dauntless Asterisk, Gray watched the battle unfold according to his design. "Phase 1 complete," reported Captain Voss, the Drax stealth specialist. "Enemy fleet is in disarray." "Begin Phase 2, ordered Gray. A small, fast strike team led by the Dauntless Asterisk itself broke from the main battle, heading directly toward the Proxian shipyards. Intelligence from the Solitary had confirmed that the enemy leadership council was meeting there to celebrate their anticipated victory. "Enemy vessels moving to intercept," warned Major Tech 12, the Rith officer. "As expected," said Gray calmly. Evasive Pattern Omega. The Dauntless Asterisk and its escort ships moved in a complex dance that no Coalition vessel had ever performed before, combining Vex technology, luminary energy manipulation, and human unpredictability to slip through the enemy blockade. Alarms sounded as the ship took several direct hits. "Hull breach on Deck 7, called out Lieutenant Reed. "Continue approach," ordered Gray. "All troops prepare for boarding action." The Dauntless Asterisk crashed into the main docking bay of the shipyard, its hull screaming with the impact. As emergency systems engage, Gray turned to his staff. "I'll lead the strike team personally. Commander Tella has command of the fleet." "Sir," protested Reed, "Supreme Commanders don't lead boarding actions." Gray smiled grimly. "Today, this one does." Minutes later, Gray led a mixed team of soldiers from all species through the corridors of the shipyard. Fighting was intense but brief. The enemy had not expected a direct assault on their leadership. In the main council chamber, Gray came face to face with Grand Marshal Ixo of the Vex, whose forces had destroyed his homeworld years ago. "The human commander," sneered Ixo, his crystal form pulsing with rage. "You dare to face me personally." Gray raised his weapon, aiming directly at Ixo's core. This was the moment he had dreamed of for 6 years: revenge for his wife, his daughter, his home. Ixo saw the hate in Gray's eyes and laughed. "Do it, human. My death will only fuel 1,000 new wars." Gray's finger tightened on the trigger. Then he remembered Elder Voss's words: "The cycle can only be broken by choosing something different." Slowly, Gray lowered his weapon. "No," he said, "I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to show you something." From his pocket, he removed a small device given to him by the Solitary. The truth. The Great Hall on Nexus Prime was filled with representatives from every spacefaring species in the galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since Operation Breaking Dawn and the capture of the enemy leadership. The battle was already being called the most significant military victory in 1,000 years. But today wasn't about celebrating victory. It was about truth. General Gray stood on the speaker's platform, facing thousands of skeptical faces. Behind him stood Commander Tella, Elder Voss of the Solitary, and surprisingly, Grand Marshal Ixo of the Vex, now his ally, not his enemy. "For 10,000 years," began Gray, his voice carrying throughout the hall, "the galaxy has known only war. We've fought each other without pause, without purpose, without end." He activated a large holographic display showing the evidence provided by the Solitary, ancient records of the architects, and their manipulation of developing species. "The wars were engineered," he continued. "Each major species was shaped by the architects, an ancient race that feared united resistance against their rule. Though they disappeared eons ago, they left behind cultural and psychological triggers that have kept us fighting among ourselves." The hall erupted in angry shouts and denials. "Lies. Human propaganda. Impossible." Grand Marshal Ixo stepped forward, his crystalline form glinting in the light. "I believe the same," he said, his deep voice silencing the crowd, "until I saw the proof myself. The Vex military technology that we believe makes us superior, designed to evolve in ways that would always threaten others. The same is true for all major species." One by one, representatives from each species examined the evidence: ancient genetic tampering in the Drax to enhance aggression, modifications to the brood hive structure to value quantity over individual lives, subtle changes to luminary energy patterns that disconnected them from physical reality, programming in Rith logic systems that prevented empathy. "This is why I could see patterns you couldn't," explained Gray. "Humans evolved outside the architect's influence. We were overlooked, considered too primitive to be a threat." The silence in the hall grew heavy as the implications became clear. Billions had died in meaningless wars, fighting not for their own purposes, but as puppets of long-gone masters. "What now?" asked a Rith counselor, her silicon form pulsing with calculations. "The evidence is compelling, but our societies are built around war. Our economies depend on it. Our cultures celebrate it. We rebuild," said Gray simply, "together." He activated another display showing plans for new governmental structures, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. "This won't be easy," he continued. "We've been enemies for thousands of years. Trust will come slowly. But for the first time, we have a choice: to continue fighting wars that serve no purpose, or to create something new. As the representatives discussed the proposal, a commotion broke out at the back of the hall. A group of human officers, led by General Stone, pushed their way forward, weapons drawn. "This is treason," Stone shouted, pointing his weapon at Gray. "Humanity finally has the advantage. With the alien forces weakened, we could rule the galaxy. My family died at Proxima Centauri. I won't let their deaths be for nothing." The alien representatives tensed, reaching for their own weapons. "This is exactly what the architects wanted," said Gray, facing Stone calmly. "To keep us fighting, generation after generation, carrying grudges and seeking revenge for losses that can never be recovered." He stepped closer to Stone, ignoring the weapon. "I lost my wife and daughter when the Vex destroyed Acheron Prime. I understand your pain. But continuing the cycle won't bring them back. It will only create more orphans, more widows, more hatred." Stone's hand trembled. "What do we get from peace after all we suffered?" "A future," said Gray. "Something better than endless war." The tension in the room was electric as Stone's finger hovered over the trigger. The fate of the galaxy seemed to hang on his next action. Slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his weapon. "I don't know if I can believe in this," he said quietly. "None of us do yet," replied Gray. "That's why we have to build it together." As Stone and his followers were peacefully disarmed, the gathered representatives returned to the difficult discussions of how to transform a galaxy that had known only war. The path forward would not be easy, but for the first time in 10,000 years, it was possible. 5 years passed. The galaxy changed. Chancellor Marcus Gray stood at the viewport of the Unity *, the first ship built through true cooperation of all major species. Below, the planet Harmony turned slowly, its surface now covered with the growing structures of the Galactic Concord's new capital city. "Chancellor, the Council is ready," said Reed, now his chief of staff. Gray nodded, his face showing new lines earned through 5 difficult years. His hair had turned completely gray, giving him his name in truth as well as fact. The council chamber was unlike the war rooms of the past. Around a circular table sat representatives from all species, not just the 5 major powers, but dozens of formerly overlooked races. Light streamed in through large windows, a symbolic reminder of the transparency at the heart of the new government. "Reports from the outer systems are promising," said Tella, now ambassador of the Luminary. "The conversion of military shipyards to civilian production is 72% complete. The Vex Academic Exchange Program has enrolled students from 23 different species," reported Exo, who had become Minister of Science after renouncing his military title. "And the joint colonization of the Perseus Arm is proceeding ahead of schedule," added a Rith counselor. Gray listened with satisfaction. Progress was real, if sometimes slow. Former enemies now worked side by side. Military industries were becoming civilian ones. Scientific advancement was being directed toward healing damaged worlds rather than destroying them. But there were still problems. "Incidents of violence have increased in the Orion sector," said a Drax representative, her scales darkening with concern. "A group calling themselves Purity Front attacked a mixed-species settlement. 42 dead. Similar attacks have occurred in 3 other sectors," reported Captain Voss, "always targeting cooperative efforts." Gray sighed. Not everyone had embraced the new peace. Many still clung to old hatreds and prejudices. Some refused to believe the truth about the architect's manipulation, calling it propaganda. Others simply couldn't imagine a life without war. "Increase security in mixed settlements," he ordered. "But remember, we must protect without becoming oppressors ourselves." That afternoon, Gray walked through the gardens outside the Concord buildings. Here, plants from 100 worlds grew together in careful harmony, much like the civilization they were trying to build. Elder Voss found him there, the solitary's pearlescent skin glowing softly in the setting sun. "You seem troubled, Chancellor," said Voss. 5 years, replied Gray. "We've made progress, but sometimes I wonder if we're really breaking the cycle or just pausing it." Change does not come quickly to species programmed for war for 10,000 years, said Voss. What you've accomplished is already remarkable. Gray nodded, but before he could respond, Reed hurried toward them, his face serious. Chancellor, urgent news from the deep space monitoring stations. They've detected signals from beyond the galactic rim. It appears to be another civilization. Gray and Voss exchanged a look. This was the moment they had feared, a new external threat that might drive the fragile peace back toward war. Within hours, the Concord Council convened an emergency session. We should prepare our fleets, argued a Drax representative, if these outsiders are hostile. We should hide our presence, countered a Rith counselor, until we know more. We should establish communication, suggested a Vex minister. As the debate grew heated, Gray saw the old patterns beginning to emerge, each species falling back on their programmed responses. He stood, silencing the room. 5 years ago, we learned that we had been manipulated into endless war. Today, we face our greatest test. Will we revert to those old patterns at the first sign of a potential threat? He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. Or will we choose something different? Together. One by one, the representatives considered his words. This was the moment that would truly show if the cycle had been broken. What do you propose, Chancellor? Asked Ambassador Tella. Gray smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The question itself was progress. They were asking rather than assuming, considering rather than reacting. I propose we use our greatest strength, he said. Not our weapons or our fleets, but our diversity. Each species seeing the problem differently, working together rather than against each other. As the council began to discuss a unified approach to the potential contact, Gray stepped back, watching with quiet pride. The galaxy had known only war, until a human general with a different perspective had helped rewrite history, and now facing a new unknown that would write the next chapter together.